Here.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
All right. Welcome to episode 4 of the SCRS podcast. I'm Captain Vermicelli. I'm here with my co-host Spectre Mage. And today we have the much-awaited Supertester interview. And we're joined here by Quemapuablos, Calphayus, Macabe. And we couldn't get Nyx, but maybe they'll pop on later. Maybe not. We'll give them a chance to do an in-depth introduction of themselves in a second. But today, what we really want to focus on is how an idea or a fix begins and how it is then implemented in the game. And I'm sure we could spend hours talking about a lot of different things. The community always wants to ask questions about a lot of different topics, but we're looking to go in depth and provide some perspective about how we get what we want in the game. Hopefully this is the first of many opportunities to sit down and explore the topics more in depth. So with that, gentlemen, if you could just please tell us about yourselves, and the more background or depth you want to go into, the better.
Well, thanks for having us on. I really appreciate taking the time to ask us some questions. So we really enjoyed just chatting with players. We're a lot of video game players at Wargaming. Obviously, we love video games. That's why we're all here. So I guess I'll start real quick with who I am. I'm Chris Stott, also Quemapuablos on the forums. I'm a producer for World of Warships. Some super quick background. How I got started, I initially joined the company for the Clan Wars team, working as a sort of Clan Wars expert. Then after about 9 months, they decided it was a good idea to make me a producer for World of Warships for North America. So I took on that job, and I've been doing that almost 3 years now. Before I joined the company, I was playing a lot of World of Tanks. I played in a clan, did some stuff on the global map. But they pretty much hired me because I was the small clan guy, and they hired another guy named Hypnotic, who was the big clan guy, who organized such fun things as NASA and some of those old huge Clan Wars events that terrified Wargaming. So they wanted to get him on board, and that's sort of where we started at.
So what kind of games growing up really influenced your love and passion for this game and to get involved in the way you did?
Yeah, so I got super lucky working for Wargaming. And I've always been into video games. My father has been working with computers since they were on punch cards. So he's huge, very technically minded, and we've always had a computer in the house. So like one of my favorite games from a kid, for sure, by a long shot, was Total Annihilation. And I told this story a couple times, I think, before in other channels, but I'll tell it briefly again. I submitted a unit to Cave Dog, which was the creators of Total Annihilation back then, which Mr. Chris Taylor was running and is now with our company, of course. And they took the idea from one of my units, and I'm sure a million other people sent it as well. But to me, they made my unit in the game. It blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, video games are amazing. I have to make video games. And then I got to go work at the company he works at and hang out and meet with him and make video games. And so this, like, Wargaming is kind of like one of those like bucket list kind of things of working with one of your video game idols. So I'm really lucky to be here.
Awesome. How about you, Calphayus?
Yeah, I'm Calphayus, the lead Supertest coordinator for the NA region. I work right under Q. I've been with the Wargaming community since 2011. It's hard to believe it's been that long.
I know. I was looking back on that, and you start realizing how long it's been.
Yeah, doesn't seem like it's been that long. But growing up, the Grand Theft Auto series, that was pretty much my passion. Don't know if that looks really good, but yeah, it is what it is.
Is that the original or is that 3?
I started with the original, and I've gone all the way and played all of them. But I joined the wargaming community. My father actually got me interested in World of Tanks. And once I found out that there was a game with tanks and you could blow shit up, I was, all right, cool, I'm in. And, I immediately volunteered any chance that I could. And when I heard that World of Warships was coming around, I went and applied for Alpha, and I think it was like, round 3, Q, that I got in?
Yeah, I can't remember.
something
It's
like
pretty,
that.
pretty early on. You were definitely one of the first few waves. I remember.
And I worked with Q way back then in the super test, and things have come full circle. We're working together once more, and everything's been going pretty well. I love everything about Warships, even though I don't play nearly as much as I should. Real life, you know.
It's all right. We won't hold GTA against you. There's no judgment here.
I've been super into Star Wars games recently, so that's my
Battlefront, maybe.
no. Star Wars: The Old Republic. That's my thing.
Oh,
It's been my crack for a while.
Little SWTOR. All right. And how about you, Macabe? I said that right, even though
Yes,
Calphayus
you-
wants to
you
call
said
you
right.
McCabe, right?
Don't listen to Cal. Don't listen to Cal.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm one of the Supertester coordinators. I've been part of the Wargaming community since 2011 as well. I didn't really realize how long that actually was until I went and looked for it a few minutes ago. But 5 years, wow. Started playing Warships when I was in a weekend beta, and that was in 2014, December, I think. And then, like a month later, got this wonderful invitation to Alpha, and I've been hooked on Warships since then. As far as what got me into video gaming, I got a PlayStation, just the original PlayStation. And with those just random games, there's like arcade games and whatnot, and I've just been hooked on them since then. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Man, that makes me feel old because I was thinking, man, Nintendo won when it came out. That Donkey Kong was awesome. But
Hey, I grew up on the Atari, and that's old.
fair
But
enough. I had
it was
one
my
secondhand.
dad's, so you know.
All right, so we kind of sent you some prep questions to kind of get context. But what I wanted to do before we kind of get into the meat is if you could give us a little broader perspective about how the Wargaming and Warships development team is really laid out. Are there a lot of crossover between the teams? Are there different teams? Do you share people? What kind of collaboration kind of goes on at the higher levels?
Yeah, I think I could take that first one. Yeah, it's the office is in St. Petersburg. It's where all the development happens. I work in the San Francisco office, but I get to travel probably at least once a month, maybe twice a month to St. Petersburg to meet with those guys. And obviously, we have calls constantly and discuss them. So we're in very close contact with those guys. The studio itself, it's I think it's oh man, it keeps growing every time. I should have looked at the exact number, but there's around 300 or so people who work there, and they're all sort of broken up in different sort of strike teams. And people do move between the teams fairly frequently, but these teams are dedicated to one aspect of the game about firing and all the mechanics around hit impacts and that kind of stuff. And these guys are another strike team, maybe around map design and strategy and all that kind of thing. And so they're sort of broken up into sort of broader groups, and then from down there they filter into smaller pieces.
So how does the region specific? I'm assuming there's an EU style office. It's kind of like your San Francisco office. How does that fit back in with the main hub?
Yeah, so it's a lot of collaboration. So yeah, as you said, there's an EU office, there's an Asia office, there's actually a Russia office as well, but it's like attached to the development studio in St. Petersburg. But they're technically also a publishing office as well, separate from their development studio. And yeah, essentially, we all get together a couple times a week and we discuss on what's going on and our plans, and then we have a global team that's helping us then unify that our sort of front on what we want to do and say, and then we go and work with the dev team as well. And a lot of those folks are former producers as well that I've worked with, and so it's a great team of people to work with at the global level. And then it said I work with my counterparts to said, hey, we want to do this event in NA. How do we not screw over the European player base by doing X, Y, or Z? It's a lot of just people throwing out ideas and seeing which of us comes up with the best one, and then we a lot of consensus building basically.
Fair enough, I can imagine. So are there any major differences between the regional offices, or are they all pretty much structured the same?
In terms of the regional offices, I'd probably say Europe is the most unique because they support so many languages. In the US, support a handful of languages, but Europe is supporting on the order of like 14, 20 real languages that they have to deal with, um, because their player base is so diverse. So they're structured a little bit differently because their team just has to be broken down by language so much more than say us.
Fair enough. All right, so if you guys are ready, let's dive right in and peel back the layers here. And if you could take a moment and kind of speak to about how the super testers are arranged and managed and selected, and kind of what the expectations of a super tester are before we get into the nitty gritty of how they function.
Yeah, I know. I think Mac wanted to get into some of the details of that. I'll just speak briefly to the regional stuff, and then I'll let them go into some of the more details about what they do on a day-to-day basis. Essentially, we have a super tester program that extends to all regions. Some people ask us like, "Oh, does Russia get more super testers or something?" And it's really just each region has a group of people that they trust to give us great feedback on. And each of those are weighted exactly evenly across the regions. We've got a lot of great testers in NA that know the game amazing. Same like with EU and Asia and Russia. So we want to listen to as many players as we can. And we know that there are smart people with strong opinions in our community. Clearly the forums indicate that to us. So
Very vocal people.
yes, some very vocal people, which that's a really great thing. It's actually, people say like, oh, it's hard. You have to deal with people criticizing you constantly, but you don't get better without having a lot of good ideas and a lot of good criticism come at you. And so that's actually one of the things we pride ourselves in and value a lot, is actually the amount of feedback we get from our players and the amount of effort they're willing to put in. Like these guys, and super testers and even the rest of our community put in a tremendous amount of work just to help us out and to make our game better. The super testers are kind of a formalized version of that, but there are many players on our forums who are just awesome players who go in and do a lot of digging and find a lot of cool details. And every team is unfortunately limited by the reality of time. We don't have a million people to do everything, and so there are things that we wish we could do and explain. And that's where our super testers come in, and some of our community contributors and our club wargaming guys, is we can get those guys in to really help us, fill in some of the gaps in which we can't do everything. We can't play the game 24/7. We can't get feedback. We can't create cool guide content all the time as much as we'd like to. So that's what a lot of those folks do. But I'll stop talking for a moment and let these guys get into more details.
So a lot of people want to be super testers, and we want to have these people as super testers, but I mean, there's specific things that people join for. I would hope that the super testers that want, or potential super testers that are applying, want to better the game, and not necessarily just want to see the new stuff. Just seeing the new stuff, it's not going to help game development. It helps the super tester because they're getting enjoyment out of it, but I think if people are going to join super test, you're going to get the real enjoyment joining it for the right reasons, which would be to help improve the aspects of the game that are being tested.
Well, I guess that leads to a pretty good question, which is, so when you're looking for that kind of person, what's the selection process that lets you really identify those people that you're looking for that are in it to truly improve the game, instead of just trying to get in to be in the know and see behind the scenes?
Well, we do use a basic set of criteria. Just basically, candidates that apply for the super test, we would prefer them to have at least 50 battles since the open beta test, because that's going to show activity. Higher battle counts are always preferred. We look at your overall statistics to see where you are, if you're a good player, if you're a bad player, and we have a mix of pretty much all the way across the board, because super testers are not required to have the most amazing stats. Average is perfectly fine, but we just want to see that you've demonstrated at least a basic grasp of the game mechanics and how the game works. We review the application that they submit very closely, because there are specific questions that they ask, and if you cannot follow the directions given, that helps us weed out the people who obviously should not be in the super test. You need to demonstrate the ability to put some thought into the questions and write out responses in a very clear manner and explain your reasonings. We look at your existing forum posts to give additional insights to your ability, whether you answer people's questions, whether you're actually helping, or if you're one of the forum trolls and trying to actually like degrade people. There's way too much of that as it is. So it's very strict that we get the best and high quality people we can. Because like what Macabe said, we're trying to better the game and better the community at the same time.
So is kind of a prerequisite that you have to be active in the forum community to be eligible, or is that just one of the things that you look at? Is that weighted?
I don't think it's I don't think it's required. I think it comes down to a lot of discretion. There is those basic set of requirements that get you in the door, but at that point, yeah, it's us looking at, say, your forum posts. It's looking at any other interactions we can find, because yeah, we're just looking for things that indicate to us that, as Cal was saying, are you're a constructive person. You're here to help us out, and this is not just something you want to be here for 5 seconds and then you're going to be out. I mean, honestly, that's what a lot of it is consistency. People who care and care about this game a lot and play a bunch, they're not going away. So if we see this guy come back several times and he's still very interested, it's obviously that this guy is someone we need to take a look at, if they meet all the other requirements. But as I said, after they meet the base requirements, it's sort of, yeah, how do we have to look at whatever we can to sort of figure out what is your style of interacting with people on the forums. How often do you try and help people? I mean, obviously, a big part of it for us is you should be helping us write feedback on the forums if you're a super tester. That's sort of like the core thing you'll be doing. So if that's something that doesn't interest you, then we probably won't, we won't have a great relationship.
How do you guys like sort of keep the balance of like the super testers? Because like you guys said, you guys draw on super testers from all sorts of skill levels, and I assume there's maybe some look at what ships most of these guys play. But I assume as time wears on, some people either because of life or fading interest, come and go. Do you guys keep a very close eye on that?
I mean, it's something definitely we look at whenever we add players, of sort of where we have deficits and in terms of our sort of perspectives in the game. So it's not something we're like, oh man, we've got, we have X number of this and we have to make sure the ratio is Y. It's that, hey, this is the super testers we have. Well, we're missing some kind of mid-range guys who are, not super hardcore. We don't really have a ton of those guys right now giving feedback. So let's focus on this in this next batch. Let's focus on grabbing some more of those. It's it comes, yeah, it's more on like a per wave basis that we sort of examine that kind of thing. It's not something we're checking every 5 minutes to say, oh no, we're not getting X kind of feedback, we better remove or add some group of people. We want to keep it as stable as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and these basic set of criteria that we use, it's not the final set in stone thing either. It's really what Wargaming thinks that they need to get the feedback that they're looking for the development studio. Like warnings and suspensions, that's a big one. Like if you're constantly getting chat banned or anything like that, obviously you're not going to get in. But if you're constructive, you're helping out, it's basically the kind of person that we're looking for, not necessarily your skill level. If you're a good guy and you're really willing to help and you have a passion not only for gaming but to make the game better and the community better, that's the kind of person that Wargaming is going to be like, hey, we need more people like this. There's no I don't know if I can really say this, Q, but there's not really a bad type of feedback, because all feedback is, accepted and it's looked after. But you really need to keep it constructive. There's some people that are very harsh with their feedback, and while it is informative and productive, it's not the way that we really need it.
I see. Okay. does the super tester selection ever like sort of filter downwards? Like, if say the developers are say looking to make a balance patch towards say destroyers or battleships, will they ever say round up some battleship players and have them test this stuff? Does Wargaming ever do anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in terms of things like, I saw one of the questions you had here around was clan stuff and, things like that. Obviously, there are a certain kind of person and player that wants to interact with that feature. And so, yeah, but in terms of getting a wider sort of perspective on that kind of thing and getting a lot of people in, usually that's something we want to do around public test. We think that our super testers, they're all very smart people and they can understand what the purpose of a feature is and try and get into the mind of that kind of player, even if it's not them and sort of give us feedback. So yeah, I mean, but there's never a mandate that comes down and says, hey, get X more things into your super test or anything like that. Like it's all on the regions to decide on, we're not really getting great feedback on this. We really think this is important. We should get some more guys who are experts in this. It comes down to a lot of it, mine and Nick's discretion in those cases.
So,
Yeah.
in the end, who has the final say that says this person is going to be a super tester?
Me.
Yeah, that's going to be the super test manager, which is currently Q. It used to be Nyx.
Yes.
And she currently is the player experience supervisor.
So,
Yeah.
so
That
if
sounds like a
it
question.
if it
Yeah,
all fair enough,
you guys change titles so much, Q. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
you can do that when you're the boss, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So as part of your review process, then do you look holistically yourself at each individual, and you go through and screen everything, or is it a I get feedback from other super testers, or do you have a recruitment style thing, or is it you all the time, full-time job deciding who's going to be a super tester?
I mean, it's a mix, right? So I get recommendations, obviously, from our super testers and from people in the community and from other employees of people that would be good and would be useful. And so that's definitely then I go back and review and say like, hey, this guy, he seems all right. Let's put him on the list. And then I'll usually review it with some people to say, does anyone have any show up any red flags or something that I don't know, maybe. Excuse me. And then yeah, basically then it comes down to, well, let's give this guy a shot. We'll let a group of people in at a time and then sort of monitor them very closely and see if they're working out. And it's very easy to see very quickly which guys are there for the right reasons and which ones are not. So we usually don't really have too many problems with bad apples, at least so far. Fingers crossed.
So on that, there are how many super testers would you say there are, and is that driven by region population, and are there different levels of super tester, or is everyone kind of in the same boat?
Everybody that is in the super test, we're all equal. There's nobody like, I'm the boss of you, so you have to listen to me. That's not what we're in the business to do. While there are coordinators, we specifically are out there to help, I guess, in lack of a better term, herd the cats to get them together so that we can have a focus session and we can do exactly what the developers have set to us. But we are by no means over any other super tester. I know Macabe and I always have talked, and I think we're right around 100 super testers for the NA region itself. Um, Q, do you have anything else for the other regions?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's about the same for the other regions. It said it's approximately a hundred-ish or so, and that comes down to just we don't have the manpower to run like a massive group of people. I'm only one guy, but luckily I have these coordinators, as Cal was saying, and these coordinators are there to help us just be kind of a nexus of information for other super testers. So hey, these guys get the information first. They always are in the know. So if you're a super tester and like, oh, is there a session this weekend? You always know you can at least ping Cal or whoever and try and get some information about what's going on. And so we make extra effort to make them in the know, but then so I don't have to be awake 24/7. We have a group of those guys helping coordinate things like that. So I feel like there was another question there that I didn't answer so far because you asked like 3 or 4, but I'm sure we'll get back to it.
Yeah, that's on me, right? I always want to know more all the time, but no, you kind of answered it, right? It was related to is the super tester population related to server population?
Right,
And I think you answered it, which is not really, right?
No. I'd say I think the RU team has a few more because they are lucky enough to have a few more coordinators out there than we do. And I'm sorry, I mean internally in the company they have a few people actually dedicated to working on the super tests. So they run, I want to say a little more than 100, but yeah, it's not based upon region size. Like people's opinions aren't weighted based upon which region they're from. That's I know that's the concern that probably a holdover from how things worked in World of Tanks. The super test was primarily run out of Russia, but we made a big effort very early on to say that Japan and the US are two of our primary countries in which we want this game to be huge. So we better include them from day one. You notice that we get our patches first, as opposed to some of the other games, which has a blessing and a curse. In
As
some
5.5 showed.
5.5 Goff.
So yeah, it's important that America and Asia and EU and Russia all feel like they're getting heard, and it's not some sort of bias here between one or the other region.
So when you guys collect feedback from the super testers, I mean, do the super testers ever sort of like first discuss amongst themselves, whatever that they were testing, to get like an idea of, the general feel of it? Or does every super tester sort of write up their own thing and that gets submitted?
It's a little bit of both. Sometimes we almost always have some kind of discussion over what we're testing, but overall, it's the independent feedback from each tester. Sometimes there's some overlap, sometimes there's not, but we talk about it at length, but we don't necessarily post the group's consensus because that doesn't cover what if there's a different perspective that the group as a whole didn't think of, but there's still one or two people that are looking at it differently.
Yeah, the more feedback that we give the development studio, the better. Because the way that they see it is, yes, we talked about it in a group. We did a after-action review of sorts, and we have different Skype channels and TeamSpeak that we talk in all the time and kind of bounce ideas off of each other. But the way that the development studio runs, and Q, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is if they can see repetition in there are several super testers submitting the exact same type of feedback about a certain aspect, then that is going to be something that the studio is going to look at further in depth to try to resolve. If there is a problem with that, then they're going to try to resolve that problem and then send it back into testing to see if what we had an issue with was fixed or not.
Yeah, as you said, it sort of helps us diagnose severity when we can see that there are a bunch of people saying, "Hey, this was a problem for me. I didn't enjoy this." Yeah, it just helps us quantify it a little bit easier because we sort of look at the super testers as sort of a subsection for the wider population, and there's hopefully representing as many opinions and different perspectives that the population would have if we could roll it out to the whole world. But of course, that's not what we do in super test because we're trying to fix stuff before it gets to you guys and has problems.
Right. So then, do the developers like literally just get the feedback directly? Like whatever super tester writes, will that like wind up on the developer's desk next day, or does it sort of go through someone who collects all this feedback and sort of pulls out like a lot, like you said, like the things that get repeated quite often, but also maybe try to keep an eye on like some dissenting opinions, so to speak. Just like if everyone says this is great, but a handful of people are saying I don't know about this. Do you guys like sort of try to like create bullet points so the developers can get straight to the point, or do they just get the raw reports?
So we try and at least synthesize some like top line for them. Say like, hey, here are the things that we saw that we thought were important. That's why they hopefully pay us money, is that we have some insight into what you guys are saying and sort of picking out the top things. But that being said, I mean, they have access to the forums, and we send them directly links to the forum itself. So they are reading it on a daily basis themselves, exactly what's there. They are aware of it. It's just helping. Again, our job is to help push things up to them and say, hey, you should be extra aware of this thing. You know, there maybe was some extra concerns, or hey, we see a lot of this on here. But the interaction is definitely one-to-one. We're again just sort of trying to shepherd it in the right direction and not say pull things out and say, oh, this feedback isn't worth it, or this doesn't line up with what I think, so this shouldn't be in here. Like all feedback is good feedback, as Cal said. Like even the harsh stuff, even the things that say, hey, you're doing this terrible and you're wrong, like we need to hear that, because
Right.
we want to fix those things, and we want to make a game that's awesome and fun.
Right.
And we're all on the same page for that. We just want to make a fun game. Everyone wants the same thing.
Yeah, I think we'll all enjoy like a more fun Warships game. I was just a little concerned because some
Yeah.
people, because it sounds like one of the main things about super testers is that you got to be eloquent, you got to be able to make your points, whatever. And some people sort of take the more verbose route to that, and it's just how much developers obviously very busy. They can't spend all day reading essays and dissertations about what's working and what's not, and it's just it'd be nice to know that sometimes these points are being boiled down just to the facts.
Yeah, and that's definitely exactly. It comes down to honestly just time management. We don't want them spending hours and hours like just going through threads. So yeah, we'll give them like, hey, here's our every patch, every super test, every public test. We send out a 24-hour report within the first maybe 12 hours of the patch going live from NA, basically saying, hey, here's what everyone said. Here's our opinions. Here's what we think probably the top issues. Check out these sections. And the development team actually has, we have a credible amount of data, but like for all of our feedback and stuff, it's all set up into graphs and charts. And so it's very easy to see, hey, the feedback on this was X statistically. We know that 75% of people said this and 25% said this. And so it's also a very data-driven process as well.
So I guess two parts on that. One, do you get to see the feedback or that boiled down subset from the other regions? And actually, I've kind of forgotten the second part. Go with that one.
Okay. Yeah, we all send it out as an email to each other. Everyone's on the same distribution list, so it's just there's a set of every time we have a patch, we can expect a whole flurry of emails from the other regions talking about their community's opinion on it, the super testers' opinion on it. Even for each patch, we actually have a separate section in the patch feedback for our players. We also have one set separately for our super testers, and so our developers can look in both places to know what are our experienced super testers saying and what is the sort of general population saying. And those are sometimes two very different things. We get to learn a lot of our super testers and what they like, what they don't like, and sort of what their perspective is. And I think that helps the longevity of just being in there and seeing it face to face. That helps our developers know, hey, this guy really hates Japanese destroyers. We probably shouldn't listen to him about feedback on that. But the guy who does love Japanese destroyers but is really critical about them, that's the guy we probably want to look at. So you get to know people's quirks in a little bit, and you understand, you have a good idea where some feedback's going to come before it even happens.
Oh, so you're saying there's a secret list out there, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Q. Just so that the people listening know, just because you're not a super tester does not mean that your feedback doesn't matter. I've seen it a lot on the forums where people are thinking that Wargaming is deaf or they don't listen to us because we're Americans. That is not the case. All of the feedback that everybody gives, it all gets to the developers, and they all highly appreciate everything that you guys submit to us. I know Victor Keesley, the CEO of Wargaming, he was up at the San Francisco office not too terribly long ago, and I'm sure he was super excited about World of Warships. I know he had a video explaining his passion for World of Tanks. But as I've talked to Q a lot, the developers there at St. Petersburg, they're always asking for feedback, and they want to know how to make the game better because, like Q said, Japan and the United States, this is where they're wanting to push that because they want World of Warships to be successful here.
So do you find well, actually, let's take an example, for instance. Okay, so can you walk us through the type of question or feedback solicitation you get when you're going to implement something, say, like dynamic weather? How does that function, and how do you get to test that?
Yeah, well, so it starts off, I mean, in a stabilization build, like long ago before any of these folks get to see it, and we, try and knock out as many bugs as possible, make it so it runs on our hardware specs that we have at a reasonable rate. And so that's sort of the first step for any feature, and then it gets, of course, rolled out past stabilization into sort of the first set of builds, which is the super test build. And then at that point said, Cal and these guys, we basically send them an email saying, hey, here's what the plan is. Here are the 5 things that are important in this next upcoming super test that we'd like your feedback on directly. Here are some threads we built, for you guys to organize that into one place. Let everyone know, let all the details go, and then Cal and those guys can actually go and tell all the rest of the super testers if they haven't seen my post in Skype or whatever. And then essentially, we start testing. And after each test, so we do a bunch of reports. We gather all that. We do some data analysis on the surveys and feedback we get. And then at that point, we either retool stuff right then and there, or we decide to, hey, this build looks fine. Let's bring it to the next level of super test or of a public test, where we get a lot more eyes on it and a lot more hardware to try it out. Even in the first couple hours of a public test, we get probably more hours of the game tested than we do in our entire time, just because of the sheer volume of people jumping in and playing. And so that's a huge help for us. We unfortunately do find a couple bugs occasionally that people on public test have to deal with. And then, of course, once we're happy with public test, we go out to a release version, and that's the production server.
Well, so when the questions or the focus areas get flowed down, how specific are they?
I mean, they get pretty specific. I mean, maybe Cal, you can talk about kind of the things we ask you guys directly, but I'll try and let me see if I can just pull what we asked for 055 or one of the super tests up. But go ahead, Cal.
Let's see.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Well, there's questions like, since this was so long ago, I'm just going to use American ships as an example. Do these ships perform as you would expect them to? Do their guns perform how they should against their Japanese counterparts? Does their armor stand up well against Japanese guns and their own guns at the same tier? And at certain angles, how well is their armor when angled? There's a lot of just very general questions that super testers in general end up focusing on, the nitty-gritty things that they feel need the most attention, and there's trends that begin to form along different things.
Well, that brings up a good question, right? So when they say, like in that question, what you would expect them to, what is the metric that's spelled out there for what you would expect them to? Is that based on game balance? Is that a historical reference? Is that a how it feels against other ships as far as fairness? Or please talk a little bit more about that part of the subjectiveness.
Well, it's pretty much a mix of all of it, really. I mean, there is going to be a historical value placed on anything that comes out in World of Warships. The chieftain would be the master of all knowledge there, but sadly we don't have him. But I mean, we have the historical value, so we're going to look at it, and Wargaming wants to try to mimic the historical facts about the ships as well as they can, while not making them extremely overpowered. And then you're going to want to look at, exactly as Macabe said, go and test it with the exact same ship. Take it into a training room and see if it can withstand itself and then its counterparts from the other different nations. Um, really, it is about historical accuracy. It is about fairness, because if it's dominating, like say the Texas, it just recently came out, I think. Um, if it would go up against a Congo and it completely destroys the Congo and the Congo stands no chance, well, now there's a problem, because we need to try to make it as balanced as we can and still make it fair.
Yet
Because,
still different.
well, yes, you still want to give it its own pros and cons. As I mean, of course, all premium ships and even regular ships, they all have their pros and cons. They're good against certain factions or certain ships, and they're bad against certain things. And it's all a big headache for wargaming, trying to make it as fair and balanced as it possibly can.
So actually, that raises a good question. How often? So we know that super testers often test new things. New ships, new maps. Like new weather effects and so on and so forth. But does Wargaming ever like say, hey, we think that there may be a balance problem with a certain class of ships. Test this out. Like, do they do that often?
With existing ships,
Yeah, with existing ships.
generally no.
no. They
It's usually the new stuff.
generally once a ship is on the production or live server, if I'm correct in saying this, a majority of balancing is done via statistics and what the developers want that specific ship or ships to accomplish.
And then the public test has a big factor in that as well. Because granted, once a ship hits the production server, it's not necessarily perfect. You're still going to have flaws, and each patch, something breaks. While you're trying to make it and fix things that are already broken, something else usually breaks. So you have to continuously go and rebalance ships, even that are already existing. So that's where the dev studio and Q would come in and they'd look at the feedback, like, okay, well, this broke the Yamato's armor. Now it's acting like an Erie instead of a tier 10 battleship. Well, we got to fix that.
That's actually a specific turret bug with the Yamato that was in closed beta. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just popped into my head.
A little bit of history there. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's it's something we do occasionally. It's not probably the main thing we do with super tests, but yeah, I mean, occasionally we'll think, okay, is this a problem? What if we adjusted X? And then we'll maybe run a super test on that. I mean, a lot of things we super test don't get to see the light of day. A lot of things get modified heavily after super tests because of the feedback that we get on them. One of my favorite ones that I really enjoyed that we never put in was the ability to place exact basically little circles of where shells would land. So as a destroyer, it just became a game of just dodge all the circles and you could never get hit. And it was very cool on the test server, but clearly it would maybe make some balance issues. So it's something that never saw the light of day. But there's a lot of little things like that where we're thinking that, well, it's destroyers needed X kind of a buff. So maybe this is an idea how to do that. Maybe, we feel that X is unbalanced in some way. One of the big ones people are talking about is US battleships right now, the 8, 9s, and 10s, they feel a little on the weak side. And so that's something we're going to try and adjust. We will probably run a super test with those changes because we know that's a concern the community has, and we'll get some feedback on that. So, yeah, it's not all cut and dry. There's so many questions to answer and so many different things we could do. It comes down to what we want to prioritize. What's the top thing that we think is the most important to address at this moment in time?
Well, thanks for
Okay.
the alternate episode name, which is now going to be the Frogger Supertester.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know if like this ever happens, but does Wargaming ever share like what statistics that they have in hand when they say we're going to make these changes? Because I know this in 5.5 they changed the Japanese destroyer torpedoes for 8s, 9s, and 10s, and I'm sure you guys are well aware of this, but every single time Japanese destroyers comes up in a forum topic discussion about whether they need to be nerfed or not, people always point out the fact that their damage numbers aren't as crazy high as some people think they are. But yeah, just like what statistics is Wargaming looking at mostly when they make some of these decisions for what to change, if they even share these things with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could talk about that a little bit. We have a ton of data. We have a huge data warehouse service that provides us pretty much every kind of data we could ever request. The problem comes more of the other way around. It's not what data do we need. It's how do we actually interpret all this data? What do we do with it in this information once we have it? And so yeah, I mean everything from where a particular ship dies on a map, to its average frag rate in the battle, to all lifetime. All that stuff is tracked. We can see that per patch, per class, per different part of the country, per whatever. There's a million ways we can break this data down. Um, Occasionally we share some data. I don't know, maybe Cal and them could talk to if there's any moments they remember recently about us sharing a particular piece of data. But if there's questions that people like, like, hey, why did you do this balance change for this? It's like, okay, well, we can show you that the Amato's win rate was X, the Montana's was Y, and so we made this change based upon this. Like, that's something we're working on as well, just to be better at in our patch notes, but also in our communications with our players in the forums and everywhere else. It's just, here's why we made some crazy change. I know it may sound weird, but when we were working in this crazy Jenga tower, all these things built on top of each other, sometimes what we do may look a little odd, but we do have reasons behind it, I swear.
And yeah, and if Q can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it also comes down to what is something's intended purpose within the game. And is something that it's capable of doing or not capable of doing explicitly hindering or making it too powerful in an aspect?
Well, when you guys contemplate a change, how fast is it implemented? What's the usual cycle from concept to implementation, and how many of those actually make it in?
I know in Supertest, whenever they change a certain aspect of any ship or anything that we're testing, I would say it's roughly about a week, maybe 2 to 3 days at their best. But
Before that, no idea.
yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean, I know right now it's roughly about 2 to 3 days to a week, just depending.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was talking about those 24-hour reports, we actually in North America, because of the time zone changes, they're not going to wake up until around 10 o'clock at night. So we don't. I call it a 24-hour report, but I really more like an 8-hour report. It's basically in the morning, we'll get in, we'll check the feedback, we'll look it over, start building a report. By the end of the day, like I'll usually hop on in the evening and just gather up all the feedback and send an email off to the dev team saying, hey guys, here's the latest info, here's the changes that we suggest, here's our thoughts. And they need it that night to start working on it. I mean, they're working, literally the moment they have it and they're in the office, they're going to start working on it. So I mean, some changes, sometimes we have iterations of Supertest that are a couple days apart because they've just built a whole new build and they're going to go again. But other times, they want to make some more substantial things, maybe test internally, or there's some nasty bug they've got to work out and it's taking them longer than just a day or two to find. Sometimes it can be a week. But yeah, they're very fast and very agile and jumping on this stuff. And as a it's sort of unrelated side note, but part of this is that we are also actually working our development cycle to be even shorter right now. Usually we were on a 6-week development cycle, in terms of and that usually means from the moment you formulate a feature to when it actually can get in the game is probably around 12 weeks to something more closer to 6 weeks. And that's the concept is there from put on a piece of paper to it's in the game and you can play it on the server. That's a lofty goal with a sort of 3 to 6 week turnaround time, but we're
Ambitious.
gonna see if we can, ambitious to say the least. So we're gonna start trying that out in the next few weeks and see if we can become even more agile and even faster to react to this kind of thing.
On a somewhat related tangent, So you said for the new content you guys are aiming for, faster turnaround time. Uh, has there ever been like a discussion possibility of also sort of putting balance changes on like a slightly faster cycle too? Because we're starting to see now that like large balance patches are starting to hit roughly once a month. But is there a chance that that could be shortened a little bit just so that developers can have more can like make smaller tweaks instead of waiting like once a month to make a huge wave changes?
Yeah, that's sort of part of this whole cycle changeover as well. Is that things like that where we it's a critical issue that we want to fix. Like we can be a lot more agile and getting on top of that. And yeah, like a balance patch, or a polish. This enables us to go back and use a few cycles on polishing it. And there's actually a whole separate development track that we're putting in that is all about polishing. And all about balances and fixing anything that's existing. Because we've been developing a game, and so we released last September, and our mindset was we got to put everything in there, we got to get it all done. So it's a scramble, kind of race to the finish line to get everything in there. But now we're released. Now we need to sort of take a step back, think about what's important and how we divide up our time. And yeah, a big portion of our time needs to be going back and polishing some of the stuff that's in there. There's a lot of great features, but there's some stuff that definitely has some rough edges. I mean, that's any free to play game. That's any game in general. I would say, you're never done with it as much as you want to be. So we're perpetually going to be going back and polishing things for sure for probably at least the next 5 years, or at least as long as this tank's been around so far. It's the release of our games is just the beginning. You look at where Tanks was when it was released and where it is now. When I played Tanks, there was no physics, so everything was literally restricted to going up 3 lanes, like completely restricted. Now that first moment when all of a sudden you could just drive off a cliff and you were like, oh my god, this game has changed completely.
Oh, I remember when, I don't remember the name of the map, but it was a hill, and you could just go down the slope of the hill, and the border of the hill would stop you, and you'd only go about a fifth of the way down it, and you could just shoot whatever's down there back up. Now, no, you're gonna roll down that hill.
Yeah. So I'm pretty actually excited to see where Warships goes in the next year, and where's Warships here in 5 years? What does that game look like? Because that's going to be pretty crazy, even compared to what we have now.
Yeah, and we need exploding volcano skew.
I'm telling you,
Yes,
man,
please.
the dev team loves volcanoes. You notice a lot of their videos.
I mean, I expect boulders flying out of the air and just sinking a destroyer.
Yes.
Destroyer.
The particle, it's really hard in our game right now.
You heard it here first.
Well,
We're gonna get
yeah.
volcanoes that sink destroyers.
Yes, yes, I heartily approve of this.
Yeah, confirm nor deny.
So, for super testers, do you only focus them on gameplay aspects, or for example, do you involve them in trying to explore or identify exploits like botting or aim hacks?
Not specifically, but we do have quite a few of our super testers that just on their own will go and research things and then post feedback in a general discussion area of our super test forum.
Yeah, I think that's mostly dealt with internally within Wargaming. They do have their own customer support team that would deal with that sort of stuff. That's not really something that the super testers get into.
Especially when it comes to other people's accounts. There's a privacy concern. We don't want to discuss any sort of actions or litigations that we're doing against other players. That would be a breach of privacy. So if for those situations, we usually just need to keep that stuff internally. When how we work with, say, a person who's being a botter or a team killer or something like that. But yeah, it's something we're definitely looking into constantly, and we look in all places. The super test general discussion has some great stuff. Like they aren't there to talk about the patch, but they also we respect their opinion. So we would love that they also have a general discussion about other things they care about in this game, bots, exploits and things like that. It gives us a good idea and kind of a litmus test of what we can expect and what's coming down the pipeline. If guys in Super Test are talking about it, they're kind of like the first group, and then before it expands out to the wider population's knowledge, and then in a week or two you can expect to hear a few posts on the forums about it and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a litmus test for us to realize where we need to focus, in the future.
So when super testers provide feedback, and whether it's related to what they're talking about or not, and it's not something that you task them to look at, how heavily do you look at the extraneous information that they provide and that feedback? And does Wargaming encourage that, or is it a matter of time and development cycle? We need to focus on the priority questions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to a priority. But that being said, outside of just actually running the super test and getting feedback directly on that, yeah, there is a lot of other kind of feedback and stuff that I look at personally. I know Nico does as well, and we generate reports weekly. Besides the patch reports, besides everything else we mentioned, that are just exactly that, where we go in and look through the forums, look at our super testers, and sort of take, to the temperature of issues, look at what might be coming up. And so that is definitely a daily occurrence as well at Wargaming.
Okay. Kind of circling back on something I wanted to talk about earlier. What's the current turnover rate of super testers?
I think we lose maybe 2 to 3 every other month-ish.
Yeah, that probably sounds
Somewhere
about
around
right.
there.
I don't think I have the numbers in
And
front of me.
it's not like they're getting kicked out or they're doing something to get kicked out. It's just that some people just lose interest in Warships and move on to another game. They might come back down the
Yeah,
road, but
some people have personal stuff, that they got to take care of. School, like some people are okay to do it during their summer vacation, when they're not in college or something. But when they're in college, like, they have to take a step back and they don't feel like they can contribute. So yeah, I mean, it's there's a small turnover, but it's really nothing super huge, because we don't usually have any major issues that, like, we have to ban a ton of testers for doing something stupid. They're all smart guys. They know what they're doing.
So in general, you don't have any NDA issues or huge breaches that you just have to get rid of somebody?
Every now and again we do.
I
But
mean,
Wargaming squashes that pretty quickly.
it was pretty much just the last specific one that I remember was literally somebody decided day after getting accepted in the super test, they post on the forum, I'm going to be the worst super tester ever, and then they post a picture of a destroyer that's not released, and, well,
Kicked.
pretty much.
What do you do in that case? I mean, honestly, like, I deal with more of our violations from super tests or people who just accidentally do something they didn't realize they couldn't do. We're pretty explicit that obviously you can't use any sort of third party sites to communicate with other super testers. Like, you couldn't use like Imager or post something to YouTube, because a lot of that stuff is insecure, and if it gets out, it's out there. And so it's a lot of, hey guys, like, please don't do anything stupid. Please try and keep this stuff at least somewhat on the down low. As the whole point of super tests is we can test things quietly and letting you get feedback and not have the whole world know. But obviously, it said this, like that other folk we were just mentioning, they don't quite get the memo.
Wow. And then you have different sites like the Armored Patrol that is a constant pain in our ass.
Oh, they love their data mining.
I just wish they'd get their translations right. Every time I look at their Q&As, I have to go to the Russian producer who does a lot of those QAs, and I'm like, "Did you say this?" He's like, "No, I said literally the exact opposite. Here's my text."
And they don't even quote the original source. It's like they're saying this is a Q&A from the Russian forum from a developer, and it's not. They don't even put the link to that for you to go and get like translated yourself. If that's how you get correct information, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Just real quick question. You said earlier it was a pain for you guys. Do those guys actually create any sort of difficulty with testing things for you guys?
I think it was more for these guys just because they get asked so many questions and it makes their jobs a little harder. Not really from Wargaming's perspective. I don't think.
I get messages from random people on the forum who then give me a link to a third-party site saying, "Is this happening? I mean, I really want this to happen, or I really don't want this to happen." And it's like, I can't tell you even if I knew.
Well, okay. I mean, so here's a question then. So as Cube mentioned, some of these translations are, pretty atrocious. Is there then like any sort of initiative in Wargame to say have like an official translator sort of take these replies and translate them into English or what else have you? Just so that way there's like you guys sort of control the message, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a couple different ways to look at it. I think, they're just answering questions on the forums, and what a lot of those things are is just people just doing a roundup of people's responses on the forums. And I don't think that's necessarily super useful. I think what's probably a better choice for us to do is to focus more on doing the same thing on our forums. So if you have a bunch of questions, that those get answered on a regular basis, and that people, there are a lot of developers on the NA forums. There are guys with those developer tags, and they're there for a reason. And so, we really want to just, I don't know, encourage that as well, to make sure that people know that, like, we are we are working with these guys as well here. It's not just over there. So I don't know. It's a complicated thing, but I think you got to do the right thing of making sure that people are informed, which is the key piece. And something, we want to do more of is, in general, just try and be clear about that, because that's the core of the problem. The core isn't that their translation sucks and that we should translate whatever people say on the Russian forums. It's that NA has questions as well, and that we should be answering them as well as effectively. So that's definitely
Well,
something we're working on. We did a QA with Reddit last week. It's something that
yep.
I'm personally been focusing on to try and make sure that we can do more of. I've got a couple ideas of how we can do some cool things that get a little bit more direct representation from the development team. But yeah, hopefully I can run those out in the next couple of weeks. But I said, we hear your cries. Don't worry.
Well, I mean, like I certainly agree. I think one of the main reasons why these translated Q&As get so much attention is because there's a lot of information in these Q&As. I remember I think it was like roughly a month or two ago, a developer basically broke down how fire affects a ship's detectability, and the exact formula for determining when you fire a gun, based on the gun caliber and like some other numbers, this is how much additional detection that you guys get. I feel like this information, isn't specific to one region or another. I think all Warships players would love to know this information, and I just think it would just be a great way to sort of let the community answer a lot of these questions that the community has. If these Q&As that are on the Russian forums were properly translated and brought over, or at very least we just got told about it, and just it's just sitting there for us to go look at.
Yeah, so I totally get that. And some of those big posts that they make where they've broken that stuff down, we definitely talked about it and had a similar post go up on the NA forums that sort of broke down the same information. Because yeah, I totally understand that stuff is really, really big information. But like, the perception is, though, is there's a direct Q&A that, like, they're posting every week where they're just answering asking and answering questions. That's not exactly how it works. That it's mostly just people just pecking around, talking to, like, look at what Nico posts on the forums every day. If the guys at Armor Patrol want to go and look through every post I do on the forums and pull out all the tidbits of stuff that I say, that'd be great as well, because we all drop different kinds of knowledge, on these forums. But to your point specifically about those guides, like that kind of stuff, yeah, we really do want to have people be in the NA forums ask those same questions. Like, if you guys want to know that, ask us and we can go get that data. We can go look up the formula. I have access to said literally every formula and every piece of data about warships ever possible. If you want to know the equation for how penetration mechanics work, we can go into that. Like, it's horrifying and long, but I can show it to you. It's yes, I mean, I think that said, I don't want to copy what Russia's doing. I want the same level of transparency and ease to ask questions and get answers on the NA forums as it is over there. Then that's all worthless to you. You don't care about what some guy on the Russian forum said, because your question's already been answered in English by a developer and you're happy. So I don't want to, I said, I don't want to do a stopgap measure and say, let's just publish all the Q&As and I just go verify these things, because I don't think that's really efficient, and I don't think it's the right way to go. But that being said, the core of your problem is totally valid. And the core of your question and your issue is totally valid, that, like, NA needs a better relationship to be able to ask these questions and get this kind of answer.
Okay. So, back when we first started, you guys mentioned obviously there are super testers from all the regions. I'm assuming you guys all play together?
It's not. There's we
one
like to.
Supertest server, but due to time differences and being in different countries, we don't get a chance to necessarily
No whisper
all
target
play at
down.
the same time.
No
I mean,
whisper
I
target
can
down.
distinctly remember where there was either some of us who were literally up at 1 a.m. in the morning for no apparent reason, or vice versa, someone, say, on the Asia Super Test, up at 1 a.m. in the morning for no apparent reason, and we just decided to get these 12 people from between the servers onto one of our TeamSpeak servers that we use for communication, and we go and just test further. So, I mean, there's that, but I can really only think of maybe 3 or 4 times where we actually did something between all the servers, and that's mainly the time constraints.
All right, fair enough.
I know I sat in on an Asia focus session once. Their coordinator saw me in just roaming around, and they asked me to stop by and kind of give my 2 cents on everything that was going on, and it was kind of nice. But I mean, it was dark 30 in the morning, and why I was up at that time, I have no idea. But
Okay. Well, do you guys? So, you guys earlier mentioned that you guys are all on the same mailing list. So, the feedback, from Asia, or whatever, you guys do see that kind of stuff. Just, do you guys notice any sort of like patterns between the regions? Like, is one ship perceived as being, say, overpowered here in NA, seen as underpowered elsewhere, or, any sort of discrepancies between the regions?
I think that's more of a meta question, because other servers tend to be more aggressive than the NA server. You see a lot more bow on, long range, just lobbing shells back and forth on the NA server. So our perspective of the balance is going to be different than, say, the Russian server, where they like to rush at each other.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, you really have to look at the feedback and then find some kind of middle ground where it breaks in both places, or works in both places.
That's pretty cool. So evidently the Russians are more aggressive than NA.
Yeah, we have a couple super testers that went and tested that theory by creating a Russian account and going for it, and they're like, there's a lot less camping, and these are much faster paced battles.
That's kind of cool. Because I remember a long while ago, back, I think, right around when the game went live, when we were still sort of like in that battleship meta where, it was not uncommon to see literally 6 or 7 battleships per side, and just the matches would just boil down to, just each side bowing onto each other and just fleeing shells for 20 minutes. During that time, there was an uproar about how powerful carriers were, and someone had mentioned that on the Russian forums, or in the Russian game, they were a lot better about balling up together and focusing their AA together to sort of deflect these carrier strikes. So so with this in mind, I mean, how does wargaming sort of balance around that, right? Because if one region is sort of doing this team, playing as a team, balling together, and largely neutralizing a CV, but here on NA, obviously, we didn't quite have that kind of behavior. We see a lot more of it now, but back in the day, it was a lot rare. How do they juggle this?
I mean, it's there are some regional differences between the servers. Not too many balance changes, obviously, difference between the servers or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to not each server is unique in its own ways for sure and has many things, but the balance we find between it, yeah, it really isn't that much. Really isn't that different between players skill wise are sometimes varied between the servers depending on Russia traditionally has just a larger player base, so you would expect a larger group of new players in there. But that's it comes down to statistics. We look at the data. We look at, is this ship balanced on average? Does this make sense for the game? But we haven't really run into too many things where like, oh man, this will work only on this server and all the other servers will be screwed kind of thing. That's luckily we haven't got there yet.
Well, on the balance issue, when you decide to try and balance something, Wargaming decides to do that, or even when you're super testing, are you keeping is there a list of things that you may do in the future that you're not sure if it'll be incorporated or not, but you could balance an issue for right now, but it may not be balanced for a future aspect that you're looking to incorporate?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we plan for the future, but I mean, if we're making balance changes, we'll just have to keep that in mind for when we actually get to that point. We won't usually like do something preemptively, knowing that it will be basically working later or have to get changed later. Yeah, balance is such a complicated thing. It's subjective in a lot of ways, but it's also very data driven. Instead, it's really comes down to just talking to people, having each regional producer, making sure they're informed about what their community cares about and what's important to them, and then getting us all in a room just to argue about it, And once we hash it all out and figure out what's the best course of action, it's we can all move forward together. As I said before, it's a lot of consensus building between the regions. It's a lot of us just trying to work together because we all sort of are independent in our own publishing ways, because we obviously want to support each region that's appropriate and what makes sense for what we think is good for, as a publishing studio. So we're going to have sometimes wildly different opinions on what can happen, but in the end, we always try and get together and figure out, well, what's the best for everyone, what's best overall for the project, and what's best for our players, what's going to make them happy, what's going to make this game great. So there's a million different factors. And then, of course, once you actually get a balance change that you think is good, you have to go and get it approved by 7,000 people, making sure the balance designer says this won't screw up balance, making sure the guy who makes the models can make the change correctly. So it's such a crazy, huge machine of things that have to all come together. I'm amazed video games ever get even made in the first place.
Well, I guess that's kind of why we're in the perpetual open beta style of games these days. But who got the biggest vote, or who won that said, hey, North is going to be chosen as the first dynamic weather map?
It was not my vote, I'll tell you that. I hate that map so much.
What was your vote?
I don't know. I voted for, I think, Fault Line. I think it's a pretty good map. Or Atlantic, I think. I for some reason, North, like the gameplay on that, at least on the NA server, players are not very aggressive on it, and it comes to a lot of like long range slugfests. And I don't know. I was sad when they chose North, because I was like, man, that's like the one map I'm not super stoked on in World of Warships. Couldn't you pick any other one? So, but other producers really wanted that map, and so we let it happen.
So is this kind of like a weird live public test server run of dynamic weather? Is that why it's only on one map?
A little bit. I mean, I think that's one way you could put it for sure. It's that, we wanted to roll out the changes, and there's also some cool UI changes that are coming in the future patches that will make some of those changes, like the weather impact, a little more clear. But we wanted to like figure out, is what we have out there, like in terms of gameplay impact, broken? Is it too much for players? And so if we release it in such a small group of people who only see it on a certain map, it's not going to be game breaking for them if all of a sudden something goes wrong. Granted, it hasn't. There's no major thing that has a problem so far. But now we have some feedback on it. Players know what it is, and we just want to be careful with this, because making our game mechanics even more complicated is a scary thing to do. Something like vision is already a really complicated system, and adding another layer of complexity on top of that might not be great for new players. So maybe that's something that maybe only mid-tier players experience, because having to memorize that my distance that can get spotted at is 5.6 kilometers, but now it's only 4 for this split second of time. Like, that just may be too much. Maybe it's not enough. So it was sort of a litmus test again for us to check, like, how far should we go with these gameplay impacts? What ones are going to be cool? How is this one received? And so, yeah, in some ways it is kind of a test, but we are happy with where it is. We think it's cool. We think it's fun. We just want, to see if players agree with us and if we're on the right track.
Well, what is the hardest aspect? If you had to pick one, the very top one, not that there aren't 1,000, right? What is the hardest thing to balance in the game?
Oh man, and I'm not the expert at this, like, because we should have like Andre or something out here. He's our head of game design, head of game balance. He would have, I'm sure, some really, really nice answers for you guys. Personally, when I've been trying to balance things like how premium ships should be in relation to their tech tree counterparts, how unique they should be, and how that uniqueness then affects the strength of the ship compared to its counterpart. That's one of the things that's always really interesting to me, to sort of determine, like, how do we make a premium ship interesting, but not like dramatically so strong because it has this really special and unique ability. That's one of the ones I struggle with a bit.
All right, guys. Hate to interrupt, but we do now have Nyx down below in the dry dock. If you want to bring her up here.
Oh, that's
Hello.
awesome.
Awesome.
There you go.
Hi, Nick.
Hey, Felicia.
All right, how's that?
Much better.
There we go.
Thanks.
See, this is why we young folks are around. Not saying that you're old or anything. That's Canadian's job. Next.
Hey.
But like I built the Supertest TeamSpeak for Wargaming. While I don't own it, I run it for them.
Fair enough. So you kind of jumped in when we were talking about putting Q on the spot for what's the hardest thing in the game to balance. He picked premium ships to ambush you quickly. What do you think is the hardest aspect of the game to balance?
Well, I think all of the interactions between the ships are hard to balance. And like you said, with the premiums, but how the premiums interact in terms of what their peers that are similar at the tier level, that sort of thing. I think all of that is hard to get it right. And even if we feel we've gotten it right, there are a whole bunch of people who are not going to feel that we got it right. And it's very subjective about what right is.
Fair enough. So I'm sure on a whiteboard in somebody's office, there's this giant list of items left to balance, right? And so right now, not necessarily that it's the hardest, but sometimes low-hanging fruit is easier and quicker to get to. What's number one on everyone's list to balance?
Let's see. Where's my sheet?
So not a whiteboard, a spreadsheet then. That'll do.
Yeah, sorry.
For
I
all
keep
we
mine
know,
digital.
for all we know, it's a bunch of post-it notes stuck to the bottom of his monitor.
That's what mine would be.
Yeah. I would like
There's-
personally. I mean, I would like to see the shell types balanced more. And I know Wargaming hears it a lot, but HE is still ridiculous. Everybody seems to be HE dependent now versus AP, and I mean we need to kind of break people of that so that they use a variety of different things. And sorry about my dogs.
They feel that same way about HE apparently.
Yeah.
Is there ever a possibility we might get like a third shell type of some sort?
By
I
whatever
would
do you
definitely-
mean? A
Yeah,
premium shell
wouldn't-
type?
I wouldn't rule it out. I think there are definitely some ideas we have, but I mean, right now, HE and AP, the idea between them is that HE more easy and to understand and sort of general damage kind of thing, and AP is a much more high skill level. And so there's some balancing I think that still needs to happen there, as Cal was saying. But I don't think we have anything in the plans right now to say like, hey, next week we're coming out with premium shells or something like that, or a new type of shell that has a different kind of effect. It's something we've explored and definitely we keep thinking about because I think there's some cool ideas there, but it's not something we've prioritized recently.
Okay. So earlier you mentioned you guys have this huge data warehouse just sitting there with, just God knows how much, information's in there. So two-part question. Number one, is what are the chances that we as a public, as players, will ever get a chance to maybe see some more of that data? And number two, what are your guys' opinion on giving players like these statistics? Because sometimes developers do want to like hide certain statistics just because sometimes people draw premature conclusions from them. But on the other hand, if these statistics are out there, you guys are more free to share, why certain balance changes are being made.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big push for us. We're trying to do in general. And when the last patch, we did some really cool things where we, had a breakdown of why different changes were happening, and we got the dev team to, write a few comments for the major ones and sort of explain, hey, here's our thoughts behind this, here's why we did this, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that is something we want to do more and more of for the future, giving you guys an insight into sort of what we're thinking and sort of help you understand why we made a change is definitely, I think it's important. We looked at Blizzard's patch notes. Of course, they have a really great set of patch notes. You look at a lot of weird things when you're a game developer, like looking how someone structures their patch notes between different companies. So I spent just like a week just looking at different people's how they make patch notes. And Blizzard does really cool stuff where all their major patches, they've got a little blurb that says, here's why we changed it, here's the reasoning, here's why you shouldn't be angry about it, because this is why it makes sense balance wise. And it's really smart, really, really good stuff. And it's something we want to try and fall along suit with. You had a question to start with, and I can't remember it now. What was it? 'Cause
It was, would we ever, as players, ever get a
Yeah,
chance
data,
to
that's
see
right.
this data? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's something that we want to share more of. We talked about that post on the RU forums where they broke down sort of like things like fire chance, shell arc, and all that kind of stuff in a very detailed way. Yeah, it's something we can do in NA as well. Something we were considering doing with some of our map guides is also showing some sort of heat maps of where ships have died and sort of the different classes and where they go. Something like that I think would be interesting for people to check out. But if there is specific data, we want to encourage people just to reach out to us and say, hey, we want to know this. Like, this is important. People keep asking about this kind of data. And maybe we can do something like, the RU forums did, where we do a kind of a more deep breakdown and deep dive into this particular mechanic for you guys. And so, maybe that's something that we want to live eventually on the wiki. And so you can always find these sort of things in general. Or maybe it's someplace that on the portal that lives. I'm not quite sure. But yeah,
Sorry, folks. There was an unfortunate cut in recording, but fortunately, Q was able to pick up where he left off, and we didn't miss anything. Man, that is unfortunate, but that's all right. I'm glad it recovered.
Yeah, that's right. We're back. So I'm not quite sure where I started breaking up, but basically you're asking about data. Yeah, I mean, it's something we want to definitely give you guys more of. And it's not that we are worried that you're going to make some weird conclusions out of it. It's more just to protect some of our game and make sure that there is nothing that can be exploited, and nothing that can be very obvious for players that would just really be bad for our game. I mean, in general, like it's not something that like we're worried that someone's going to see something and say, "Oh, why did you make this change?" Like, we want to be very open and transparent about why we've made changes, and giving you guys some of that data is something that we want to work towards. So maybe if there's something specific you guys want to know, like maybe we can do a big post on the forums about it and kind of go into some real deep information on this particular mechanic or whatever, and then we can make that live on the wiki or on the portal or wherever that's appropriate to live.
Well, I think one of the overarching themes we kind of got from this is that more participation, at least from the community, in a more constructive fashion, will be answered, and there's a lot of interaction. And the more people who participate, the more we can get stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really this company amazes me in how much it's really player centric and focused on you making sure we're making a great game. Guys like Victor we talked about earlier. He just loves video games. He's been playing games for a long time, and he made World of Tanks because it was a game he wanted. We made Master of Orion because it's a game he loves, and we keep throwing more money at that game to make it bigger and bigger, because every time he looks at it, he goes, "Man, I could make this game even more awesome. Let's do it." And it's a cool culture.
Sorry, folks, and we had one more interruption, but we made sure we captured everything that we needed to, and we moved on. Yeah, apologies. And so anything you guys are talking about, I didn't get a chance to record because I was the one recording, but which is unfortunate, but I appreciate you guys sticking it out with us to fight through this, to kind of get to the end. So was there anything that we wanted to kind of recap before we go into kind of the closeout portion of this session?
Well, I've got a bunch of stuff for the closeout sections.
Of course, I'm sure you've got all sorts of spoiler stuff to ask, but I had one more thing on kind of sharing of the data, which was I kind of want to ask you about community modders and kind of Wargaming stance and the Supertester kind of stance on what the position of modding is, and if that's something that's to be encouraged or discouraged, or where the line between a cheat and a plus is.
Well, we have a folder in our game called mods, so that's the first indication that yes, we do support mods and mod makers. We also have a partnership with Curse that we've been along running with World of Tanks specifically, that we work with modders, and also of course on the RU forums, they have a couple of really great programs where the development team can help give modders a little bit of a leg up in getting ready for patches and things like that. So in general, yeah, we love mods. want to definitely not in any way say we want to discourage people from making mods, but there are some mods that we definitely want to make sure don't give players an unfair advantage. And how we define an unfair advantage is based upon essentially, if you could reasonably, figure this information out with between you and your friends or good communication, that's something that's fine. A UI element and it gives you a little bit more information, that may be fine. But something as complicated, as the direction of every turret's facing on another ship, that's not something you could reasonably know from the ship that's behind an island. And so there's some discretion there, but it's a lot of it. We just don't want to give people too much of an advantage in our game. That being said, when people make mods, a lot of times we implement it into the game. We have a reticle contest going on right now in which we are actively asking people to make cool new reticles for our game, and then we're going to put the top ones that we like in the game. This last patch, we put in, I think, the 5 of the top mods that we found in terms of reticles that people liked. So we definitely support mod makers. We want to get you guys into the game as much as possible. And from the NA side of things, we also need to step up with our mod support and help you guys out with the depacker or the unpacker, sorry, and all the tools that you guys need. So it's something we're working on. I know we haven't been the best about it in NA. I'll definitely be first one to say that, but it's not something because we want to discourage you guys. We don't like you. We love mods. We just want to make sure the policies are right and we roll out a really good service for everyone who does want to help us and also just does want to make cool mods.
Awesome. And another thing with the community and modding and moving on to, how much do you guys pay attention or follow player run events? I know there's been a lot of clan or player initiated tournaments or little contests and stuff that are going on, and when you watch those, or if you watch them, what is kind of the feedback or the takeaways you have from those?
Yeah, I know. I try and watch as many as I can. I know Nico is better about it than I am. He watches a lot of them and comes and participates actually as much as he can as well. Yeah, I think that's something that's really cool. I think it's something we want to support further. I really enjoy watching them. It's something we trying to figure out how we can also promote on the portal as well, because it's a cool thing that we want to showcase. Because I think like reenactments, all sorts of cool things, like it's just cool content and shows off our game really well. And so there's no reason for us not to try and support you guys and that kind of thing. Again, it comes down to like we just need better visibility on what people are doing. Like we hunt around the forums and try and find stuff, but just bring cool ideas to our attention. We're always willing to try and help you guys. And of course, something that definitely big part of that would be something like training rooms, which we are working on. The implementation now is the UI is not very good, and it's all very much like a test mode. But once we get that all cleaned up and stuff, everyone will have access to a training room without having to set that flag in their XML file.
What are the odds of Wargaming maybe like sort of chipping in sort of like to like so that some of these community run tournaments can have like a prize pool? Because I know Supremacy League would be very interested in having something like that, to give something to the winners. I think it would really boost visibility. It would also boost participation if there was like something at the end of it all.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're trying to be proactive about, but yeah, please come to us with your ideas and things and how you want us to support you. Things like the Supremacy League is a really cool thing, and it's something that we want to get behind and encourage as well. There's a couple cool things we have ideas around for tournaments, but it's a great start. And so, yeah, I think we want to support you guys as much as possible. So we will work hard to try and do it, but we can't be everywhere at once. So please just come to us with your ideas.
So you heard it. Definitely keep harassing them, right?
Yeah, you spell my name on the forums NikopO.
Got it. Nico.
Be like the Shawshank Redemption. Just write a letter every day.
Yeah.
So I think one of the big things that I always hear every day, and we kind of did a solicitation when we were getting ready for the show to try and see what the general sense of, hey, if you could ask one question or one thing that you kind of want to see, and I know everyone has a different opinion. One of them was clan tags. Do you have anything you can add on clan tags and when we might see them or if we're going to see them?
Clans are definitely something we want to invest time into. Right now, I don't have a timeline for you guys. I'm sorry. There's no, hey, it's going to be out in X number of months or something. But yeah, clans, clan wars, and all those kind of things are something we want to implement in World of Warships. Probably not in the same way that they're implemented in tanks currently, but yeah, I think it's obviously, you said that you've seen players already building their own clans. You've got people who want to build that community. Right now, our development is focused on features that hit a little bit more broader parts of our community. So in the next few months, you're going to see a lot of features that every player can get into, not just the guys who have a ton of friends to hang out. But that being said, we know that that's a core way that you guys like want to hang out with your friends and engage in our game is that you want to be there with an easy way to communicate with your buddy. It's a pretty straightforward thing that's been in video games for a long time. So yeah, I think it's something that will come in the future. Unfortunately, like I said, if I told you a date, I'd just be lying to you.
Just for clarification on the answer you gave earlier, when you said about seeing ships that are behind mountains, does that mean when they are spotted by friendly, but you can't see them?
No, I'm just I was just giving an example. There was a ship that for whatever reason no one on your team was able to see.
Okay.
And there's no possible way for you to have that piece of information because it was obscured from you. That yeah, obviously that's at a clear advantage because you're getting information that another player could not, no matter how hard or how good they were.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. Thank you.
Well, with that, I think we're kind of at the end of everything we kind of wanted to go in depth with. And unless there's anything you kind of want to leave us with that we didn't ask, unsolicited information, if you would.
Oh, I still got a few little small questions, but yeah, go ahead.
There's a couple fun things I want to just mention. I talked about it before, I think very briefly. But 056 is obviously something we're focused on right now. That'll get we'll talk about that more in the next upcoming weeks or so as we start previewing it and public tests and that kind of stuff happens. But like I just wanted to just highlight one of the things that I'm really excited for. It's big, but it's probably really only understood by hardcore players and guys who've been in the game for a while. But there's some really cool improvements coming to the mini map that we're hoping to get in said by 056. One of them is it's a dynamic mini map that adjusts the circles around you based upon how your visibility. So I was talking about weather earlier. Knowing your visibility range and the distance you'll be spotted by another ship or plane is very important. Having a visual indicator that dynamically changes on the map, I think, is going to be really powerful for said guys like me who play Japanese destroyers and are trying to just get on the edge of detection range constantly. And so that'll change as you fire, or said you pop your smoke, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of really cool changes in terms of UI coming in 056 that said I've just been waiting for a long time. I know you guys are probably all data nerds and as well like me. So now the hope is we'll get in a bunch more experience or a bunch more information for things like when you mouse over a ship that in that after battle report, there'll be a ton of details, kind of like there is in tanks with things like you destroyed his rudder, you broke this in module, you did X number of damage, all that kind of stuff. Really excited to get that in the game because we've got a lot of these sort of effects that have been in since alpha, and a lot of these things that we put in because we needed something in. I always talk about that fire effect that we had prior to 055. That's because at some point in alpha we needed to indicate that you were burning to death because players were looking across the map and having no idea, because for a long time actually it was an artillery view and you were actually looking completely across the map, kind of top down, kind of like how a carrier is, but for all classes. So if you were lit on fire, oftentimes you just would never know you're on fire. So we had to tell people, hey, you're on fire, by the way, pay attention. But that was just kind of a rough indicator. Now to bring it up to an actual level we're happy with, flames pop out of the side of your screen. It grows the more fires that are there. So it's visually indicating to you, oh crap, I got a lot of fire on me. I should go back and check on my ship. So things like that, we're taking a lot of the things we built in our development cycle, and now we're really polishing them. And so then the mini map things for me is a huge one. I've been wanting some more clear indication of my visibility as a destroyer player for a long time. So I'm stoked on that one, but I figured I wanted to bring a couple things about 056 at least. I was hoping you guys would ask me more about it, but I guess not. So that's fine. I can keep all my secrets.
Oh, so game on. It's free for all then.
I never said that either. But you guys, I think, got a few more questions, and then we should probably wrap up at some point.
Yeah, Spectre, now's your chance.
Since we're being asked about 5.6, what further balance changes are coming 5.6? Because I was under the impression that if we asked about 5.6, we were just gonna be told, "Oh, you're gonna have to wait. Can't talk about it right now." But if you're offering, I mean, we're all ears.
You're gonna have to wait. I can't talk about it right now. Is that what I'm sorry?
See what you did, Spectre? See
No,
what you did?
he's gonna wait until after you ask the questions, and then he's gonna be like, "I'm sorry, we can't answer those."
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I mentioned a few before. I mean, a lot of this stuff is still in development, so all those things I just talked about and the things I'll mention now are subject to change. Obviously, we're still very much in testing. Nothing is set in stone. But I'd mentioned before the changes to the U.S. battleships that are coming. That's, I think, is going to be pretty huge. I think people are going to be pretty stoked on that.
Oh,
you're
so
talking about
that's gonna be 5.6.
that we have it planned for 5.6 right now. Like I hesitate to commit and say yes for sure it will be there,
Subject to change.
subject to change. But yes, I mean, right now when I'm looking at what we're planning on for balance wise, you're talking about the dispersion increase, definitely an increase for the top three. Some AA changes. There's actually a lot of changes coming to those battleships in the next patch, so I think they're going to be changing pretty dramatically for the better.
So,
But
so the Iowas are finally gonna get their quad Bofors, like all of them.
I believe so. Yes, for like the third tower and stuff.
Yes.
You're talking about. I'd have to look up exactly.
They're like half of them are missing the quad bovers,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I
it's like
think-
half duels, half quads.
and it looks
can't-
so bad.
Yeah,
So
so
sad.
some things like that where the AA, is a little lackluster. I know for like the Iowa, we'll definitely get an increase in air defense. I feel like I remember seeing, North Carolina as well is also going to get a little AA buff. At least that's what's planned. So yeah, again, we want to make these ships more comfortable, more in line with the other ships in their tech tree. The Montana will hopefully now kind of feel like can go toe to toe with the Yamato and not totally be wrecked. So but I mean, there's just so many changes. Like I don't want to go through every individual one with you guys, but yeah, I mean, in general, the U.S. cruisers have some changes. U.S. battleships have some changes for sure. We're making some changes to some of the German ships. A couple of the Japanese ships are getting tweaked around. But yeah, there's some a few things balance wise. I think that the players are really going to enjoy.
So when
Alright,
you said
cool.
Japanese and German ships, that sound a lot like Nerf.
No, I mean, let's see. I'd have to look again. I have to look through this in detail. When I briefly ran through it earlier today in preparation for this, it was mostly buffs. Some more minor than others, but I don't remember seeing anything that said like nerf the crap out of this thing today. But it's mostly improvements.
Any premium ships coming with 5.6?
5.6.
Kitakami? Yeah.
Oh, flashbacks. So many torpedoes.
Those good
Yeah.
days. I want to at least bring the Kitakami back in time for when we have the next team battles or ranked battles, so I can play 7 Kitakamis on one team.
Nice.
That's evil. That's so evil.
It's gonna be so much fun though.
Yes, it will.
So no Campbelltown.
Campbelltown and a few other ones, might be coming to the tech tree. I think before 5.6. We have a whole bunch of ships in general. We're going to be moving to the tech tree in game. There'll be more information about that like mid-month or so in May. And that's going to have probably some of the things you'd be interested in. Campbelltown, I can't remember if it's specifically in that group, but there are a lot of big ships that'll be moving there, and I think people will be pretty stoked.
ETA on ranked battles coming back.
I don't think there's a hard timeline for that. It's something we're working on. We're reworking some of the mechanics to make it a little bit different from previous iterations. But for the most part, I think it could be anywhere from this patch, I know, until for the next couple patches. We haven't really decided when we want to roll out ranked again.
So does that mean team battles are going to be enduring through that time period?
They'll probably be offset from each other for a while. Yeah, so I think team battles will be rolling for a little while longer.
On a related note on team battles, is NA ever going to get tier 8 team battles? Also, why are we stuck at tier 6?
I mean, we made the decision in NA because we wanted to make sure the queues were populated fully. We have the majority of our player base is around 5 and 6, so we wanted to make it more open to just sort of the average player who wanted to jump into team battles. With the whole idea of mercenaries and things like that, people can very easily just jump on in. So yeah, I mean, we pushed it down to 6 because we thought it was a good place to get people for at least the first iteration into team battles, understanding what it is and having some fun. In the future, we may go up to tier 8. I think it's probably another good spot for balance. I think 6 is a good spot balance wise for the number of the types of ships you can bring. I said 8's another good one, and that's probably definitely something we'll consider for the future and maybe for the next iteration. But it comes down to we want to make sure the game is comfortable and easy for people to jump in. And if you wanted to play in team battles with multiple different types of ships, that would mean grinding to a tier 8 is not something you can do very quickly. So a tier 5 or a tier 6 is something you can get fairly easily. So if your buddy didn't have the right ship for team battles, he could get that in a week or two and not feel like he's disadvantaging the team.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'm just coming from a very biased background, but at least for me and many people that I play with, we really, really, prefer to play our 8s instead of our 6s, and I think maybe that's probably I think that's one of the biggest draws of say Supremacy League is because it takes place in tier 8s. But yeah, hopefully in the future we'll get tier 8 team battles.
Yeah, I think what he was basically indicating is that the population statistics don't support that, but hopefully we can work to change that in the future.
Also, another related note: are we ever gonna see, say, like rewards for team battles, like we do for rank battles? And are we ever gonna see like a ladder so that people can know where their teams are and how they stack up?
There is an online ladder right now. I don't know if you guys have seen that on the portal, where you can check where your team ranks up. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that's that functionality we want to get into the client itself. So, it's obvious for you to compare with your buddy's team and all that kind of functionality. Uh, yeah, I mean, we have obviously we track that stuff. That's available for players to find out, but we haven't had a chance to get it in the game quite yet.
And how about the rewards, if any are to be considered?
Oh, right, the reward stuff. Yeah, I mean, for team battles, it probably won't be as aggressive as something like ranked. Ranked is, very much about your individual skill if you are good. Um, but yeah, team battles, it's something we are considering. How do we make it like a little bit more interesting for players to constantly jump in and play and feel they're getting rewarded on a regular basis? So something like signal flags, maybe something we can consider. I mean, the system is a little bit different with how the ELO sort of stacks you up in compared to the whole like star system that is we have in ranked. So we just have to figure out what's appropriate, what works. But yeah, we want to incentivize team battles in a similar way if possible.
All right, cool. Uh, so there were some rumors that when the next ranked battle season comes out, there's going to be some sort of system where if you did really well, but you're on the losing team, you would not lose a star. Any updates on that? Like, is that actually a thing? Has there been any new developments on that front?
Yeah, it's something we talked about actually last time, or maybe yeah, 2 times ago. I was in St. Petersburg with the balanced team there. Yeah, obviously being on the losing team and doing a really awesome job feels bad, because you obviously contributed a lot, but yet didn't really get anything for it. So yeah, it's something we're considering maybe for the top player on the losing team or the top few players, they will, not lose a star, because yeah, they qualified essentially as working hard and clearly trying to carry the battle despite the rest of their team. So yeah, it's something we're considering.
Cool.
That's why I was mentioning like there'll be some changes to the mechanics of how ranked works. So, like those are the kind of things we're considering to sort of make it a little bit more accessible, but still make it like a very competitive experience.
All right.
User left your
Sure.
channel.
Uh, okay. Some very short questions. The Nagasaki port. It's been in the client for a while. When are we going to see a general release for it, so you don't have to download a mod to get it?
The general release for it, I haven't seen that one yet.
No, not the general. The Nagasaki port.
Yeah, the not you said when when are we getting it released in the game permanently? I'm sorry. Yeah, I saw. Yeah, we rotate through a handful of different ports just to keep like the file size a little bit lower because like if we put every port in there, it could be kind of taxing for some people. But yeah, it'll come back at some point eventually. We have a constant variety of new ones we're coming in. We've got some set up that will hopefully be for Memorial Day. for some more European holidays like Victory Day. So there'll be more ports to come for sure. But about the Nagasaki one returning anytime soon, I can't remember if we have that planned for the next few months or not. I don't think we do.
Okay, all right. Next quick question. You guys showed off at PAX East this awesome patriotic America camo for the Texas. The Texas is out, and I have yet to see anyone sport that camouflage. When is that camouflage coming out?
What are you talking about? We never said anything about that at PAX East. I don't know what anyone's talking about.
I must have missed it then.
Yeah, I didn't see that on the stage show floor. I must have missed that one.
All right, fair enough. So a while ago, I think one of the Russian developers released a mod that showed the little smoke circles. Is there any plans to actually incorporate that into the base game?
Yeah, I mean it's really cool that actually the Russian team, the guys in St. Petersburg there said obviously passionate about mods as they make a lot of mods themselves. So it's something we're considering is which kind of mods we like, which ones we think are cool features. We might release them as a mod first just to sort of test the waters, see if people enjoy it, see if people think it's broken, and kind of gauge a reaction for it. So yeah, it's something that, I mean, that's why we release them as mods occasionally, is just to sort of check with people to see, what people think about it and if it's something that we should put in the game or not. And, said player made mods are some of our official quote unquote mods. They make it in the game all the time. There's a lot of, like, I could go through the client and show a lot of cool things that were because players had designed something really awesome and we took their lead and went with it.
All right, cool. So we know that the armor viewer is coming to the game relatively soon, right? Is there a chance we might be able to get like some sort of like almost like a gun range type of thing where you can select which gun and then just shoot like a shot at the ship with no dispersion, just so you can get a very clear idea of what guns can penetrate where on the ship?
Yeah, that's not in our first iteration that we have planned for the moment. It's something we have been talking about. Yeah, it was a very very similar idea of something like that would be able to place points on your ship and determine whether a shell would penetrate or not. That said, that we don't have that ready, and that's maybe something we can consider for future iterations. But right now, the first one basically is going to show off the different layers of armor, and then the different sort of internal sections of the ship itself. So it'll be at least informative for players to understand like why they couldn't penetrate that point. It's 2 millimeters of armor, but then it's 16 millimeters behind it, as well. So it's we had the armor values in the game for a while, but they were so inaccurate and not telling the player anything that we pulled them out. But when we get the armor viewer back, hopefully that'll
All right, well, I'm looking forward to that. The last question for me, and I promise this is the last. Any chance of getting an itemized breakdown of the experience in silver that you earn in the game?
Yeah, so I was talking about the post battle report stuff in 056. That's part of that, I believe, as well, to give you a more breakdown understanding of why you earned X over Y. Why this game was worth this amount, and all of a sudden this game was worth much less. So that'll give you a much better idea of why you earned what you did, I think, and knowing that you got an exact citadel on this guy, and you killed this guy over here, and with this weapon. Hopefully that will give you all the information you need, but I'm sure there'll be some statistics we didn't include that people want to know.
All right, great.
Okay, and then the final one for me is there a Supertester recruiting window coming up soon, or is it an ongoing process, and where do you go to put your name in the hat for that?
Yeah, I guess I could finish up with that one. It is an ongoing process. We add people as we need. There are occasionally we'll do waves of super test editions when we need like a larger group of people, then we can say fill with internal recommendations. But in general, if you are just helpful and constructive on the forums and express interest to us that that's something you want to do, you can be considered. Take a look at the sections, like the news announcement sections. Sometimes there will be a super test recruitment thread. Come check it out. Yes, exactly. It's $7,500 and you'll be good. No, just kidding. Please don't do that. but yeah, just be active on the forums on a regular basis, and you'll see if when we're adding in super testers. But it comes down to kind of when we need them, when we need more, and how many we need.
Can confirm my helpful posting got me an alpha and super test.
So cut and paste. Got it. All right. Well,
Helpful posts.
we really do appreciate all the generous time you've given us tonight. It's been awesome. We look forward to having a similar engagement about more refined topics in the future. And thanks.
Yeah, thanks guys for putting this together. Really appreciate it. We're definitely willing to do this again sometime, and hopefully in the future, you'll see a lot more of us out there, and some of these questions and concerns that we asked tonight will be addressed. We think we have a great game. We are stoked that players are so excited to also be so involved. So many people just blow me away with how much they know about our game, how much they know about history, how much they just care. And so yeah, thanks again, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for coming on and answering my many questions.
Yeah, actually, Cal just pointed out in the news and information section in the FAQ, Nix has posted exactly what a super tester does and what it looks like and how do you apply.
Awesome. And that's a wrap.